I've just received a text from my brother who said we shouldn't be wasting our time on this Rugby World Cup empowering bill. We should be instead legislating to make sure that the All Blacks don't lose. And I tend to agree with him. We're a family that still hasn't got over losing to the 71 Lions, let alone losing to in the 2007 quarter final over in Cardiff. My daughter, she rubbed salt in the wounds the other day when I was going off at Wayne Barnes refereeing the All Blacks versus Ireland test. I don't know how he slunk into the country, but he got here, and I hope he slunk out. But I said, I hope that he doesn't think that sending off that Irish number 8 in the 10th minute is going to make in any way compensate for that horrible display of refereeing back in Cardiff in 2007. Well, my daughter told me that, Dad, it's just a game, get over it. I'm sorry, I said to her, you must be adopted, because it's just genetically impossible for the Davis family to get over an All Black loss. But like I said, it's too hard to get over the 71 Lions loss and what should have been an epic send-off for Colin Meads in his 55th and final test. Instead, we're still cut up about that. However, getting back, I guess, to the kaupapa of the moment, which is the Rugby World Cup empowering bill, we, Labour, do support this going to Select Committee for scrutiny. It's important that we ensure there are no unintended consequences of the legislation. I do want to talk from a tourism perspective. Being Labour's tourism spokesperson, we are going to have 65,000 people arrive on our shores for a 6-week period. I've heard the figure 85,000 tourists being bandied around. I've been assured by people in the tourism sector that it's more likely to be 65,000. We shouldn't get our hopes up that it's going to actually be the greatest thing for all communities across New Zealand, because even if you take whāngarei, I think we've got Tonga, Japan and Canada up there, and those 3 teams on their own aren't really going to drag in thousands upon thousands of tourists. And so businesses up there, tourist operations, shouldn't be expecting that all their Christmases will come at once. It's actually going to be a very short period of time that they'll be there, and not many fans are expected in some of those smaller outlying areas. Having said that, it is the greatest event that's ever going to touch down, or is going to touch down in New Zealand. Hopefully there will be other Rugby World Cups and other great sporting events, but in the foreseeable future, this is the big event. It's important that we do have the facilities, we do have the services, we do have the venues, we do have the transport systems up and running, so that the expectations of tourists, those 65,000 tourists when they arrive here, aren't going to be dashed. Even the 65,000 tourists aren't even the biggest group of people we need to be concerned about. What we need to be concerned about are the 3,000 media people, media personnel, who will be here as well, covering the games, but during the midweek when they're not covering the games, they'll be out and about. They'll be recording thousands and thousands of hours of footage around the country. They'll be the newspaper reporters will be writing articles about New Zealand. It's really important that the people that they film, that they write about, are having the best time of their lives, that we have the facilities, the legislation that actually support the expectations of all those rugby tourists, so that when they all head back home, they talk to their family, they talk to their friends about the great time that they've had in New Zealand, and everybody that they speak to makes the decision to return here to New Zealand post-Rugby World Cup. It's the thousands of hours of footage that are going to be the most important thing for New Zealand, so that we don't just have a 65,000 person spike for 6 weeks in October of 2011. Instead, we build on that, so we have tourists coming here, because over the next 10-15 years, as a result of what they've seen in New Zealand, as a result of the excellent experiences their family and friends have had while they're here. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important we do keep the numbers of people that are going to come in perspective, but we've also got to make sure that we have the legislation, this legislation, in place to support the event that's going to happen, because there'd be nothing worse than us. As we know, as has been mentioned in the House, we don't know what we don't know. There could be events or unforeseen circumstances occur, and we don't want to be scrambling around at the last second trying to put legislation in place, or even worse, not have legislation in place, and then we actually get bogged down in quicksand trying to actually make decisions at the last second, and the people that are here coming from overseas, their expectations are let down. So this is a really important piece of legislation. And so part is just talk of the legislation. There are 6 parts, but part 1 talks about definitions within the Act. Part 2 establishes the Rugby World Cup Authority, and it is really important that we have proper preparation for the Rugby World Cup, and we need to ensure that there is efficient, safe, that the arrangements are efficient and safe and done lawfully, that the delivery of services for the Rugby World Cup is exceptional, and we also have to make sure that the safety of individuals come here is paramount. Not only the safety of individuals, but the security of their property. So we need to have legislation in place to ensure that occurs. We also need to be really mindful of the effect on the environment. We can't just have this legislation, which is going to be temporary legislation, actually have long-term impacts on the environment. And of course, we have to maximise the benefit of the Rugby World Cup to New Zealand. And again, I come back to what I've been saying about tourism. Tourism being our second biggest export earner. $50 million a day at present is spent in New Zealand on tourism, and we expect, of course, with 65,000 people to turn up in a very short space of time, that spend will rise, will increase. 1 in 10 New Zealanders are employed in tourism. We need to make sure that the Rugby World Cup and this legislation supports tourism and make sure that everybody has an exceptional time when they come here. I do take the points that my colleague Phil Twyford has made about the liquor legislation. It is important that we don't actually liberalise liquor for a very short time and set a precedent, and it makes it difficult for us to unwind the clock, and that we create other unintended consequences as a result of this legislation. Part 3 talks about sets out the scope of applications that may be made and how they're to be lodged to the Rugby World Cup Authority. Part 4 gives the Minister certain powers to enable unforeseen matters of urgency to be dealt with, both in the final preparation stages of the World Cup, but also during it. And as Te Ororo Flavel said in Māori, that ultimately, I guess, this means that there is one person in charge who has the final say, and we have to be careful that there's not abuse of that power. And of course, Part 5 looks at the temporary process, or provides a temporary process for licensing, the sale and supply of liquor during the Rugby World Cup. Part 6 includes further miscellaneous provisions, and I think that the part that's missing is Part 7, that actually legislates for the All Blacks to win. We should also, while we're at it, legislate so that the All Whites don't lose against Paraguay on Friday morning. Mr. Speaker, the Rugby World Cup is going to be the most exciting event to hit New Zealand's shores. It's a pity that we have actually made this debate probably one of the most boring debates in history. With that, Mr. Speaker, and again, we should really legislate so that the All Blacks win, because it was that fateful day in Dublin in 1991 when Tim Horan flicked the blimmin' miracle pass to David Campese, dotted down. We lost all chance of getting into the finals. We lost the semi-final, and that was the day we ceased being world champions, and that thick black cloud is still hovering over us to this very day. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.